Hey, tonight we're diving into the real life of a Viking warrior. Get cozy, dim the lights if you can, maybe light a candle that smells like pine or sea salt to set the mood. This won't be like those glorified tales of mighty heroes with horned helmets, which, by the way, Vikings never actually wore. Instead, we'll explore the harsh realities of what it was really like to live, fight, and die as a Norse warrior over 1,000 years ago. I promise you'll never look at Vikings the same way again. Congratulations! You've just woken up in a small farmstead in 9th century Scandinavia. The air is crisp and biting against your face, and the wooden walls of your longhouse barely keep out the chill of early morning. You're not a mighty jarl or chieftain, just an ordinary free man, a carl, with a small plot of land and a family to feed. The good news is that you own your land and have certain rights in Viking society. The bad news? Life is incredibly difficult, and before too long, you might find yourself forced to become a warrior, whether you want to or not. Your day begins before dawn, as it always does. The longhouse is filled with the sounds of your family stirring, children, extended relatives, and perhaps even a thrall or two. That's a slave, captured during raids or purchased from traders. Everyone shares this single-room dwelling, alongside some of your smaller livestock that stay indoors during the colder months. The sweet, earthy smell of animals mingles with wood smoke from the central hearth, which has never fully gone out because relighting fires is too precious a task to do daily. Your first task is to check on your animals and crops. Viking life revolves around farming far more than fighting, something the History Channel shows don't emphasize enough. The short growing season in the north means every day of agricultural work is crucial. You cultivate barley, oats, and rye, tend to your cattle, goats, sheep, and pigs, and hope the harvest will be enough to survive the coming winter. Starvation is a constant worry, lurking at the edges of your consciousness like a wolf in the shadows. After tending to your farm duties, you pause to eat a simple breakfast of leftover stew and a chunk of dense, coarse bread. Your wife hands you a cup of watery ale, safer to drink than most water sources and providing needed calories for the labor ahead. The children are already helping with chores. In Viking society, everyone works as soon as they're able. There's no such thing as a carefree childhood when survival requires all hands. As you finish your meal, your neighbor Leif approaches your doorway. His face is grim, and you know instantly what this means. Your local chieftain has called for men to join a voyage. It could be for trading, exploration, or more likely, a raid on foreign shores. Either way, you're expected to answer the call. You might be wondering why you'd agree to leave your farm and family for such a dangerous journey. The reasons are complicated, but essential to understand. First, the harsh environment of Scandinavia made farming difficult, and population pressure meant many young men had few prospects for land of their own. Second, while you might think of Vikings primarily as warriors, they were also explorers and traders seeking new resources and wealth. And third, in your society, a man's worth is often measured by his courage and the honor he brings to his family and community. Besides, refusing the chieftain's call could mean losing social standing, protection, or even your rights within the community. Viking society valued loyalty and bravery above almost all else. So while you may not be eager to leave your farm and family, you understand the necessity. This is the way of your people. The preparations begin immediately. You must gather what supplies you can. Extra clothes, perhaps some dried meat or bread, and most importantly, your weapons. Unlike the professional warriors who serve wealthy jarls, you don't own an expensive sword or chainmail. Those are luxury items worth more than your entire farm. Instead, you have a handcrafted wooden shield, reinforced with iron at the rim, and boss, an axe that doubles as a tool around your farm, and perhaps a simple spear with an iron tip. The same blacksmith who crafted your farm tools likely made your weapons. Your wife watches silently as you collect your things. Both of you know the dangers ahead, but little is said. Viking women are strong and capable. While you're gone, she'll run the farm, trade in the market, and keep your family alive. She may even participate in community governance during your absence. She hands you a small amulet, perhaps Thor's hammer for protection or another symbol meaningful to your family. You tuck it into your tunic, close to your heart. The next day, you march with other men from your community to the coast, where a long ship awaits. The sight still fills you with awe, despite having seen them since childhood. The graceful, narrow vessel with its high, curved prow, carved to resemble a dragon or serpent, is a masterpiece of craftsmanship. The overlapping planks nailed together and sealed with wool or moss, mixed with tar, will keep the sea at bay during your journey. The ship itself has no deck, just open space with wooden chests that serve as rowing benches. There are no private quarters, no shelter from the elements. You'll sit shoulder to shoulder with 30 to 60 other men, taking turns at the oars when the wind isn't favorable for the single square sail made of woven wool. Your shield, like everyone else's, is hung along the gunwale, providing some minimal protection from waves and enemy arrows. As you board the ship, you feel a strange mixture of dread and excitement. You've heard tales of wealth to be won abroad, of the honor earned through brave deeds, and of distant lands with milder climates and rich soil. But you've also heard of storms that swallow ships whole, of fierce resistance from foreign peoples, and of men who never return to their families. The voyage begins with a sacrifice to ensure favorable conditions. Perhaps an animal is slaughtered, its blood collected in a bowl that is sprinkled over the ship with a branch, while prayers are offered to the gods, especially to Njord for safe passage over the seas, and to Thor for strength in the coming challenges. Some men may carve runes into their weapons, or the ship itself for protection. Others quietly touch their amulets and whisper their own prayers. As the long ship pulls away from the shore, you take one last look at the land you call home. The fjord's steep cliffs rise dramatically on either side, the dense forests beyond hiding the small clusters of farms where your family and community will continue their daily struggle for survival without you. You don't know if you'll ever see this place again. The first hours at sea are relatively calm as you navigate the protected waters of the fjord, but as you reach the open ocean, the real hardships begin. The North Sea and Atlantic are notoriously rough, with cold, choppy waves that constantly splash over the low sides of the vessel. There is no escaping the spray, and within hours, you're soaked through. Your woolen clothing provides some warmth even when wet, but the chill seeps into your bones nevertheless. Space is extremely limited. You sit on your wooden chest containing your few possessions, shoulders pressed against your shipmates on either side. The man next to you, Gunnar, has been on raids before. He tells you to tie your belongings securely and to sleep sitting up with your back against your shield to avoid rolling with the ship's motion. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and uncomfortable. Food aboard the ship is simple and unvaried. Dried meat, hard bread, perhaps some cheese or dried fruits if available. Fresh water is limited and becomes increasingly stale as the journey progresses. When it rains, men eagerly catch what they can in their drinking horns or helmets. Larger ships might carry a few live animals for slaughter during the voyage, but these are consumed quickly. There are no toilet facilities, of course. Nature's calls are answered over the side of the ship when possible, or in designated containers that are emptied overboard. Privacy is non-existent. Every bodily function, every moment of weakness or discomfort, Every fear that flashes across your face is witnessed by your companions. This forced intimacy creates strong bonds among the crew, but also means there's nowhere to hide your doubts or insecurities. Days turn into weeks as you navigate along coastlines, occasionally stopping to replenish supplies, gather information, or make small raids on isolated settlements. You learn the rhythms of life at sea, how to move with the ship rather than against it, how to read the weather from the clouds and the birds' flight patterns, how to work in coordinated silence with your fellow oarsmen when the wind dies. You also learn more about your companions. Some are like you, farmers who've joined the expedition out of obligation or necessity. Others are younger sons of wealthier families, seeking their fortunes where no inheritance awaits them at home. A few are hardened warriors, who live for the thrill of battle and the prestige it brings. Most, regardless of their background, dream of finding enough wealth abroad to improve their standing back home. The chieftain who leads your expedition, Bjorn, is respected, if not beloved. He's proven himself in previous voyages, returning with enough wealth to build a fine hall and attract loyal followers. He's responsible for the ship, an enormous investment for any Norse leader, and for the success of the mission. If you return empty-handed, his reputation will suffer along with everyone else's fortunes. This knowledge makes him push the crew hard, taking risks when opportunities arise. After nearly 3 weeks at sea, with stops along the way, your target comes into view, a monastery on the coast of what will someday be called England. Its stone walls gleam white in the morning sun, and no defensive forces are visible. The monks who live there have wealth in the form of precious metalwork, illuminated manuscripts, and stored food, but little military training. It's an ideal target for your first raid. Bjorn outlines the plan simply. Beach the ship close to the monastery, form a shield wall for protection against any unexpected resistance, and move quickly to secure the valuables before local forces can respond. You're assigned a position in the shield wall, your farm-hardened muscles and basic weapons training deemed adequate for the task. As the ship approaches the shore, a strange calm settles over you. The weeks of discomfort and uncertainty narrow to the single point of action. You check your axe, adjust the grip on your shield, and watch the shoreline grow closer. Your heart pounds in your chest, but you take deep breaths to steady yourself. Around you, some men grow quiet and focused, while others joke nervously or boast of what they'll do. A few murmur prayers to Thor or Odin. The ship's keel scrapes against the pebbly beach with a sound that seems impossibly loud in the early morning stillness. Immediately, men begin leaping over the sides, splashing through the shallow water to secure the vessel and form up on the beach. You follow, the cold water shocking against your legs as you wade ashore with your shield raised and axe at the ready. The weight of your equipment drags at you as you move up the beach. Your shield alone weighs several pounds, and the constant motion of the ship has left your legs unsteady on solid ground. But adrenaline pushes you forward as you find your place in the shield wall, overlapping your shield with those of your companions to create a nearly impenetrable barrier. From the monastery, you can now hear bells ringing an alarm. Figures in dark robes scurry between buildings like startled birds. One of the warriors near you laughs at the sight, but you feel an unexpected pang of sympathy. These men of God never chose to be warriors, while at least you were raised to expect this moment might come. Bjorn gives the signal, and the shield wall begins to advance toward the monastery gates. Each step brings you closer to a confrontation that will change you forever. Whatever happens in the next few hours, you know you won't be the same person who boarded that longship weeks ago. For better or worse, you've become what your people are becoming known for throughout Europe, a Viking warrior. The monastery gates are barred, but they're designed to provide privacy, not to withstand a determined attack. Several of the stronger warriors break through with a makeshift battering ram, and then your shield wall pours into the courtyard beyond. The monks have gathered what weapons they could find: kitchen knives, wood-cutting tools, heavy candlesticks, but they're clearly untrained and frightened. Your training takes over as you advance with your shield up and axe ready. The first monk who approaches you is elderly, his hands trembling around a rusty sword he can barely lift. You could kill him easily, but something stops you. Instead, you use your shield to push him aside roughly, knocking him to the ground but sparing his life. Not all of your companions make the same choice, and soon the courtyard is echoing with shouts, prayers, and cries of pain. You force yourself to focus on the task at hand, gathering valuables while securing the perimeter against potential reinforcements. Inside the monastery's main building, you find richly decorated chalices, crosses studded with gemstones, and bound books with covers of worked metal and ivory. You stuff what you can into a sack, trying not to think about the frightened faces of the monks or the violence happening around you. When the signal comes to retreat, you're almost relieved. The raid has been successful. Wagons of grain, livestock, precious metalwork, and even a few captives who will become thralls back in your homeland are being herded toward the ship. But the experience has left you shaken in ways you hadn't expected. This is the reality of being a Viking warrior, not the glory celebrated in songs, but the brutal practical necessity of taking what you need to survive when your homeland cannot provide enough. As you help load the plunder onto the ship and prepare to launch before local forces can arrive, you notice blood on your axe blade, though you don't remember striking anyone. You wipe it clean on your tunic, trying to push away the faces of the monks. You tell yourself they'll recover and rebuild, that you took only things, not lives, when you could avoid it. But the justification rings hollow even as you say it silently to yourself. The journey home begins with high spirits among the crew. The raid was successful, with minimal losses among your party. Men compare their plunder and boast of their exploits, some exaggerating their deeds to seem more impressive. Mead and ale captured from the monastery are shared around, creating a celebratory atmosphere despite the cramped conditions. You participate in the festivities, but your mind keeps returning to the monastery courtyard, to the old monk with the rusty sword, to the moment when you chose not to strike him down. Was it mercy or cowardice? Will the other warriors think less of you if they learn of it? Or was it the kind of choice that separates men from monsters, even in times and places where violence is common? As the ship heads back toward Scandinavia, you realize that while you may return home physically, a part of you will remain forever changed by what you've experienced. You've taken your first steps into the complex, contradictory world of the Viking warrior, one where farm tools become weapons, where peaceful men become raiders, where the line between provider and plunderer blurs with the horizon ahead. Night falls over the ship as it cuts through the dark waters. The stars emerge above, the same stars that guided your ancestors and will guide your descendants. You wonder what tales will be told of this day, of your people, of the choice you made in that monastery courtyard. As sleep finally claims you, rocked by the endless motion of the sea, you dream of home, of your farm, of the family waiting for your return, and you wonder what kind of man they'll find when you finally return to their arms. The return journey from your first raid is not the triumphant voyage you might have imagined. While the ship is laden with plunder and spirits are high among many of the crew, the physical realities of life at sea quickly dampen the celebration. The cramped quarters feel even tighter now, with chests and sacks of stolen goods taking up precious space. The smell of unwashed bodies, stale food, and sea spray creates a pungent atmosphere that never dissipates. Several days into the return voyage, a storm descends upon your ship. The sky darkens to an ominous gray-green, and the once manageable waves grow into towering walls of water that crash over the gunwales. Rain pelts your face like tiny arrows, and the wind howls through the rigging with a voice that sounds almost human. This is when you truly understand the vulnerability of life on a Viking longship. "Bail!" Bjorn shouts over the tempest, and immediately everyone not manning the oars or the steering oar is scooping water from the bottom of the ship using whatever they can find: wooden bowls, helmets, even cupped hands. Your muscles burn with the effort, but you don't dare stop. If the ship takes on too much water, you'll all meet the same fate in the cold depths of the North Sea. The storm rages for 2 days, during which no one sleeps more than a few minutes at a time. Food turns to soggy mush, and fresh water mixes with seawater, becoming undrinkable. Several men suffer injuries as they're thrown against the hard wooden sides of the ship or struck by shifting cargo. One young warrior breaks his arm when a particularly violent wave throws him across the vessel. The ship's oldest member, a grizzled veteran named Halvar, sets the bone with practiced efficiency, but with no proper medicine, infection is a constant threat. "I've seen men die from less," Gunnar mutters beside you as you watch Halvar bind the broken arm with strips of cloth. Battle wounds are cleaner, they bleed freely and purge themselves. But a break beneath the skin? The rot can set in before you know it. You've heard of this rot, this infection that turns wounds black and fills them with foul-smelling pus. Back home, healers would use poultices of herbs, honey, and even molds scraped from bread to fight it, but at sea, options are limited. The injured man's fate now rests with the gods, and with his own body's ability to heal itself. When the storm finally subsides, the toll it's taken is clear. 2 men were swept overboard during the worst of it, never to be seen again. Their names are spoken quietly as the survivors bail the last of the water from the hull, a simple remembrance that's all the funeral they'll receive. Their families back home will learn of their fate only when the ship returns without them. "The sea takes its share," Halvar says, noticing your gaze lingering on the empty spaces where the lost men once sat. Rand's daughters are greedy. He's referring to the goddess of the sea and her 9 daughters, who are said to drag sailors to their doom. Better to die with a sword in your hand than to be taken by the waves, but we don't always get to choose our end. This casual acceptance of death is something you're still adjusting to. In your farming community, death usually came to the very old or the very young, or occasionally through accident or illness. But among warriors, it's discussed as an ever-present companion, not something to be feared, but something to be faced with courage when it inevitably arrives. The days blur together as you continue northward, hugging coastlines when possible for safer navigation. You stop occasionally to replenish supplies, sometimes trading fairly with local populations, other times taking what you need through shows of force. Each interaction with foreigners reinforces how differently they see you compared to how you see yourself. In their eyes, you're not a farmer seeking to support your family. You're a fearsome Viking warrior, a bringer of chaos and destruction. It's during one of these coastal raids that you experience your first real combat. Until now, you've been present during attacks, but faced minimal resistance. This time, the local militia has been warned of your approach and stands ready to defend their village. As your ship approaches the shore, a volley of arrows arcs toward you. Most clatter harmlessly against upraised shields, but a man 2 benches ahead of you cries out as an arrow finds the gap between his shield and his neighbor's, lodging deep in his shoulder. "Shields up, form the wall when we land," Bjorn commands, his voice steady despite the danger. The discipline of your crew shows as men continue rowing despite the arrows, driving the ship toward the beach with determined strokes. The moment the keel grinds against the shore, you're moving, leaping into knee-deep water and rushing to form the shield wall on the beach. Your heart pounds so loudly you can barely hear the shouted commands. The overlapping shields create a barrier between you and the village defenders, but it's not impenetrable. Arrows continue to fall among you, and one grazes your cheek, leaving a burning line of pain that quickly wells with blood. Then comes the clash. The local militia charges your shield wall with spears and axes of their own. The impact is jarring, like being struck by a living battering ram. Your shield takes the brunt of a spear thrust, the iron tip punching partway through the wooden planks but stopping short of your body. You push back against the pressure, feeling the man next to you doing the same, the entire wall moving as one organism. Now, Bjorn shouts, and the front rank of your formation lunges forward with their weapons. Your axe swings in a short, vicious arc, connecting with something solid. There's a scream, and suddenly the pressure against your shield lessens as the man facing you falls back, blood pouring from a wound in his arm. What follows is chaos unlike anything you've experienced. The neat formation dissolves into individual combats as both sides press together. You find yourself face to face with a bearded man wielding a wood-cutting axe similar to your own. His eyes are wide with fear and determination, a reflection of your own expression, you imagine. He swings, and you barely get your shield up in time. The impact numbs your arm to the shoulder, and you stagger backward. Your training asserts itself despite your fear. As he pulls back for another swing, you step forward instead of away, getting inside his reach. Your axe comes up and across in a movement you've practiced hundreds of times while chopping wood, except now the target is human flesh and bone. The blade bites deep into his neck, and hot blood sprays across your face and chest. The man makes a horrible gurgling sound as he collapses. You've just killed another human being. There's no time to process this momentous, terrible act. Another defender is already moving toward you, and you react instinctively, raising your shield and preparing your axe. The next few minutes are a blur of motion, sound, and sensation. The impact of weapons against your shield, the jar of your axe striking armor or flesh, the shouts and screams that come from both sides, and sometimes from your own throat. When it ends, the village defenders are either dead, wounded, or fleeing. Your side has won, but not without cost. 3 of your shipmates lie dead on the beach, and at least a dozen more bear injuries ranging from minor cuts to potentially fatal wounds. You yourself have acquired several new injuries, a deep cut on your forearm, where an enemy blade found a gap in your defense, and bruises all over your shield arm that are already turning purple against your pale Nordic skin. You fought well, Gunnar tells you as he helps bind your arm with a strip of cloth. First real battle? You nod, your voice temporarily lost. The adrenaline that carried you through the fight is fading, leaving you shaky and nauseous. The man you killed keeps appearing in your mind, his eyes, the sound he made as he died, the hot splash of his blood across your skin. It gets easier, Gunnar says, misreading your silence as simple shock. Not better, mind you, just easier. He finishes tying off your makeshift bandage. Clean that with seawater when we get back to the ship. It stings like hell's own fire, but it helps keep the rot away. The raid continues despite the resistance, with the survivors collecting whatever valuables they can find in the now abandoned village. You participate mechanically, filling a sack with food, tools, and a few pieces of silver jewelry, but your mind remains fixed on the beach and the life you took there. Back on the ship, as you clean your wounds with seawater as instructed, Gunnar was right about the sting. Halvar settles beside you. The old warrior has been observing you since the battle. The first one stays with you, he says quietly, so only you can hear. As it should. When killing becomes too easy, you lose something important inside. He helps you rebind your arm with a cleaner cloth. What you're feeling? The sickness, the doubt. It means you're still human beneath the warrior. Hold on to that, even as you learn to live with what we must do. His words offer small comfort, but you appreciate them nonetheless. You're beginning to understand that being a Viking warrior isn't about embracing violence for its own sake. It's about doing what's necessary to survive in a harsh world, while trying to retain your humanity in the process. Not everyone manages this balance. You've noticed how some of the men seem to revel in bloodshed, competing to claim the most kills or the most impressive feats of violence. Others, like you, participate because they must, taking no joy in the suffering they cause. The journey continues northward, with one more significant raid before you finally turn toward home. By now your body bears the marks of your new profession, half-healed cuts, deep bruises, and a collection of minor burns from rowing under the summer sun. Your hands, once calloused from farm tools, now bear new calluses from the constant grip on shield handle and axe haft. You've lost weight despite the plunder of food, your face becoming leaner, more weathered from constant exposure to wind and salt spray. The physical toll is significant, but it's the changes inside that concern you more. You find yourself scanning every coastline for potential threats, calculating the defensibility of each harbor where you make camp. You sleep lightly, waking at the slightest unusual sound. Your dreams are frequently filled with the faces of those you, Voester, have encountered in battle, both those you've killed and those you've seen die. You wonder if these changes are permanent, if you'll ever fully return to the person you were before boarding the longship. After nearly 2 months at sea, with stops along various coasts, the familiar shoreline of your homeland finally appears on the horizon. The sight brings a flood of emotions, relief, joy, anxiety about the reception you'll receive, concern about how your family has fared in your absence. The crew, despite their exhaustion, finds renewed energy for the final approach, voices raised in a rowing chant that carries across the water to announce your return. Families gather on the shore as your ship approaches, wives, children, parents, siblings, all scanning the vessel anxiously for their loved ones. You spot your wife standing with your children, her hand shielding her eyes as she searches for you among the returning warriors. When your eyes meet, her face breaks into a smile that instantly erases months of hardship. The homecoming celebration begins almost immediately after the ship is secured. The plunder is unloaded and displayed, with a portion set aside as an offering to the gods who granted your safe return. The chieftain takes his share first, as is his right as the expedition's leader, but there remains plenty to distribute among the crew. Your portion isn't enormous. You weren't among the most aggressive raiders, but it's enough to improve your family's situation substantially. The silver pieces alone could buy additional livestock or seed for next season's planting. That night, in the chieftain's hall, the community gathers to hear tales of your voyage. Mead and ale flow freely, and a feast of fresh meat, bread, and late summer vegetables is spread across long tables. The skalds, your culture's respected poets and storytellers, listen eagerly to accounts of the journey, already shaping the events into verses that will preserve them for future generations. You notice how the tales grow in the telling. The storm becomes more ferocious, the battles more desperate, the plunder more spectacular. The messy, morally ambiguous reality of raiding monasteries and villages is transformed into heroic adventures where brave warriors triumph over worthy opponents. The men who were lost are remembered as falling gloriously, rather than simply being swept overboard or bleeding out from infected wounds. Even your own actions are recounted by others in ways you barely recognize. And then our friend here, Gunnar announces to the gathered crowd, his arm around your shoulders, faced 3 defenders at once, never giving ground even as they pressed him hard. This is not how you remember it. You faced opponents one at a time, and at one point retreated several steps before finding your footing again. But you say nothing to contradict him. You're beginning to understand that these stories serve a purpose beyond simple record-keeping. They help make sense of the violence and hardship, transforming necessary evils into tales of honor and glory. Later, when the celebration has wound down and you finally return to your own dwelling with your family, the contrast between the public narrative and your private experience weighs heavily on you. Your wife notices your quietness as she helps you remove your travel-worn clothes and bathe for the first time in months. "It wasn't like the stories, was it?" she asks softly, washing your back where new scars have formed since she last saw you. "No," you admit, the single word containing volumes of unspoken experience. "It wasn't." She doesn't press for details, understanding that some things are too difficult to put into words, especially so soon after your return. Instead, she simply says, "You're home now." And in that moment, it's enough. But even as you settle back into your home, reunite with your family, and resume the rhythms of farm life, you know that this raid is unlikely to be your last. The plunder you've brought back will help for a season or two, but the fundamental challenges of life in the north remain. The growing season is still short, the soil still rocky and thin, the winters still harsh and hungry. Sooner or later, Bjorn or another chieftain will call for men to join another voyage, and you'll be expected to answer. Moreover, you've now been marked as a warrior as well as a farmer. The community looks at you differently, with increased respect, yes, but also with different expectations. The next time a neighboring community threatens yours, you'll be among those called to defend it. The next time a blood feud erupts between families, your fighting experience will be factored into the balance of power. The skills you've reluctantly acquired have become part of your identity, for better or worse. In the weeks that follow your return, you work to readjust to peaceful life. Your body heals from the wounds and strains of the voyage. The calluses on your hands shift back to patterns formed by hoe and scythe rather than shield and axe. You take comfort in simple pleasures, sleeping beside your wife in your own bed, watching your children play, tending to crops and animals that sustain rather than destroy. Yet signs of your experience linger. You startle awake some nights, certain you've heard the warning call that preceded attacks on your ship. Certain sounds, the clash of metal tools, the creak of wood under strain, trigger memories of battle. Your wife notices how you position yourself in your dwelling, always with your back to a wall and your eyes on the entrance, a habit formed during raids when danger could come from any direction. Winter arrives, bringing shorter days and longer nights. Your community draws inward, gathering around hearth fires to share food, stories, and companionship during the darkest season. In these gatherings, tales of the summer's raid are retold and embellished further. You're sometimes asked to confirm details or add your own perspective, which you do sparingly, sharing enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing the full truth of what you experienced. It's during one of these winter gatherings that you learn of plans for a more ambitious voyage when spring returns. Bjorn, encouraged by the success of your raid, intends to venture further than before, perhaps to the rich lands of Francia, or even to the warm southern shores of the Mediterranean. The potential rewards are greater, but so are the risks and the time away from home. "We'll need experienced men," Bjorn announces, his eyes meeting yours across the fire. men who have proven themselves able to face whatever challenges await us. The implication is clear. You're expected to join this new expedition, to build on the warrior identity you've begun to establish. That night, as you lie awake beside your sleeping wife, you contemplate the path ahead. The practical benefits of another raid are undeniable. More wealth for your family, greater status in your community, potentially enough plunder to expand your farmland or build a better dwelling. But you also think of the costs, months away from your loved ones, the physical dangers of extended voyages, and the moral weight of more violence, more killing, more lives disrupted or ended by your actions. This is the paradox of the Viking warrior's life. The same voyages that might secure your family's future also take you away from them and put your life at risk. The same actions that earn you respect within your community make you feared and hated by others. The same skills that help you protect what you love also enable you to destroy what others love. As you finally drift towards sleep, your thoughts turn to the gods. You wonder what Odin All-Father, with his wisdom and his ravens that bring him knowledge from throughout the world, would counsel, or what Thor, protector of mankind, but also a bringer of necessary violence, would have you do. You even think of Freya, who receives half of the fallen warriors in her hall Folkvanger, wondering if she watches your choices with interest, anticipating your eventual arrival in her realm. These divine figures offer no clear answers, but their stories remind you that even the gods face difficult choices and suffer for them. Perhaps that's the closest thing to comfort available in your world, the knowledge that struggle, moral ambiguity, and hard decisions are woven into the fabric of existence, from the lowest thrall to the highest deity. As winter slowly gives way to spring, you continue to work your land, spend time with your family, and recover your full strength. The decision about the next voyage remains unmade, hanging over you like storm clouds on the horizon. You know that soon, perhaps when the ice thaws from the fjords and the first migratory birds return from the south, you'll have to choose whether to remain a farmer who once went a Viking, or to more fully embrace the life of a Viking warrior with all its terrible glory and meaningful suffering. For now, though, you focus on the present, on teaching your son to repair fishing nets, on helping your wife preserve the last of the winter stores, on maintaining the relationships that give your life its deepest meaning. Whatever path you choose when spring arrives, these connections are what you're ultimately fighting for. A place in the world for yourself and those you love, a chance at security in an insecure time, a legacy that might outlive your brief span of days beneath the watching eyes of gods and men. Spring arrives with a gentle persistence that belies the harsh winter that preceded it. The fjord ice cracks and drifts out to sea. Wild flowers emerge from patches of exposed soil, and migratory birds return to build their nests. With this awakening of the natural world comes the inevitable renewal of human ambitions as well. Bjorn, true to his word, begins gathering men for his grand expedition south. This time, he promises, the rewards will be greater than before, enough perhaps to transform a man standing permanently rather than merely sustaining him for a season or two. You've spent the winter months in quiet deliberation, weighing the potential benefits against the known hardships of the Viking warrior's path. Your wife has sensed your inner conflict, offering neither encouragement nor discouragement, understanding that this is a choice you must make for yourself. She knows as well as you do what's at stake. Months of separation and danger balanced against the promise of greater prosperity for your family's future. I will manage while you're gone, she tells you one evening as you both sit by the hearth, watching the flames dance. As I did before, but know that we need you to return, not just what you might bring back. Her words touch the heart of your dilemma, the tension between providing for your family through raiding and being present to protect and guide them through life's challenges. In the end, various factors settle the decision. The previous year's harvest, while not disastrous, was not bountiful either. The additional resources from your first raid helped your family through winter, but your stores are running low as spring begins. Several neighboring families have already committed men to the voyage, creating an unspoken pressure. And perhaps most significantly, there's a part of you that, despite the hardships and moral complexities, found something meaningful in the experiences of your first journey. A testing of limits, a brotherhood forged in shared danger, a glimpse of wider worlds beyond your fjord. So it is that you find yourself once again preparing for a voyage, gathering supplies and readying your equipment. This time, though, you approach the task with the benefit of experience. You know now to pack extra clothes that can be layered for warmth or shed for cooling. You've crafted a water-resistant bag from treated leather to keep some clothes dry regardless of conditions. Your shield, damaged in previous fighting, has been carefully repaired and reinforced. The axe, that served as both tool and weapon, has been given a fresh edge by the community's blacksmith. You also prepare in less tangible ways. You spend additional time with your children, trying to impart months' worth of guidance in the days remaining. You ensure your wife knows where all your tools are kept and which neighbors might help with particularly difficult farm tasks. You make offerings at the community shrine, not just to Thor for strengths or Odin for victory, but to Freyr for fertility of your fields in your absence, and to Frigg for protection of your household. The day of departure arrives with clear skies and a favorable wind, a good omen that lifts spirits among the crew. This time, the leave-taking feels both easier and harder than before. Easier because you know more of what to expect. Harder because you're more acutely aware of all you're leaving behind. Your youngest child clings to your leg, not fully understanding why you must go. Your oldest looks at you with a mixture of pride and worry that seems too mature for their years. Your wife's goodbye kiss carries the weight of unspoken fears, but her eyes show trust in your return. The ship waiting at the shore is larger than the one from your previous voyage, a magnificent long ship, nearly 80 feet from stem to stern, with a high, curved prow carved to resemble a snarling dragon. It can accommodate 80 warriors along with their supplies and still maintain the shallow draft that allows Vikings to navigate rivers as well as open seas. This vessel represents an enormous investment for Bjorn and his allies, a commitment to more ambitious raiding that will need to yield significant returns to be worthwhile. As you board, you're greeted with nods of recognition from veterans of your previous expedition. Your status has subtly shifted. You're no longer the untested farmer joining his first raid, but a proven warrior who chose to return for another voyage. You find your assigned spot and stow your sea chest beneath the rowing bench, noting how much more methodically you arrange your belongings compared to your disorganized packing the first time. "Good to see you back," Gunnar says as he settles onto the bench beside yours. The man has become something of a mentor to you, his greater experience, a valuable resource during your first journey. "I told Bjorn you'd come. Some men get a taste of the sea and can't stay away, no matter what comforts wait at home. I'm not sure it's the sea that called me back," you admit, checking the lashings on your shield where it hangs at the gunwale. More the needs waiting at home that require what the sea voyages might provide. Gunnar shrugs. The reason matters less than the choice. You're here, and we're stronger for it. He nods toward the shore, where families still watch the preparations. They'll be proud when we return with enough silver to set them up properly. The journey begins, as before, with sacrifices and prayers for safe passage. This time, though, you notice more attention paid to Odin rather than just Thor and Njord. This shift reflects the greater ambition of the voyage. You're not merely seeking safe transport and the strength for raids, but the cunning and wisdom the All-Father represents. The destination is further, the dangers less known, the need for guidance greater. As the ship pulls away from shore, powered by both sail and oars in the light morning breeze, you find yourself more observant of details you missed in the anxiety of your first departure. You notice how the shipwright has crafted each overlapping plank to flex with the waves rather than fight against them. You appreciate the intricate knotwork in the rigging that allows the single square sail to be adjusted precisely to changing winds. You see how each man's position is carefully considered for balance and efficiency of movement. The first weeks at sea follow patterns now familiar to you: the rhythm of rowing shifts, the rotation of watch duties, the careful rationing of food and water, the discomfort of living in perpetually damp conditions with minimal privacy. But you navigate these challenges with greater equanimity than before. Your body, while still taxed by the demands, adapts more quickly. You've learned tricks for maintaining some semblance of hygiene that help prevent the skin infections that plagued some crew members on your previous voyage. You know now to massage your legs during rest periods to prevent the painful cramping that comes from the sitting on rowing benches for hours. This greater adaptation allows you to observe more of the social dynamics among the crew. You notice how men naturally sort themselves into informal groups beyond the official assignments, clusters based on family connections, home regions, previous shared experiences, or simply compatible personalities. These smaller brotherhoods within the larger crew provide emotional support and practical assistance, sharing food, tending to minor injuries, and maintaining morale through jokes and storytelling. You also become more aware of the subtle hierarchies that exist beyond the obvious authority of Bjorn and his lieutenants. There are men whose opinion carries special weight because of their skills: the best navigator, the most experienced raider, the one with knowledge of foreign languages useful for trading or negotiating. There are others whose physical prowess makes them respected and sometimes feared, and there are those who hold influence through their connection to the gods, men known for their ability to read omens or perform rituals that might bring good fortune. Halvar, the elderly warrior who offered you wisdom after your first battle, falls into this last category. Though his fighting days are largely behind him, his decades of experience and his reputed connection to the old ways make him a valued advisor. You find yourself drawn to his quiet presence during evening hours when the rowing ceases and men gather in small groups to pass the time. The gods watch us more closely on these voyages, he tells you one night, as you both gaze at stars barely visible through patchy clouds. On land, we're just one of many concerns for them: crops, cattle, the turning of seasons. But out here, he gestures at the vast, darkened sea surrounding your vessel. Out here, we've stepped into their realm more directly. The sea is Aegir's kingdom, the wind Odin's breath, the lightning Thor's hammer. They see us more clearly, and we feel them more strongly. Do you think they approve of what we do? You ask, the question emerging before you fully formed it in your mind. The raiding? The taking from others? Halvar considers this thoughtfully. The gods understand necessity, he says finally. They know hunger and want and the drive to provide for one's family. They know battle and blood. Odin demands it, in fact. But they also know honor and its importance. He looks at you directly. It's not the rating they judge, but how we conduct ourselves in the doing of it. There's a difference between taking what you need with as much honor as the situation allows and reveling in needless cruelty because you can. These conversations with Halvar become a regular feature of your evenings, a chance to process your experiences and the changes happening within you. He offers no simple answers to your moral questions, but provides perspectives shaped by decades of similar struggles. Through him, you begin to understand the complex spiritual framework that helps Viking warriors reconcile their violent profession with their humanity. The religious beliefs of your people aren't organized into rigid doctrines like the Christianity spreading through lands to the south. Instead, they're a practical, living relationship with divine forces understood to be powerful but not all-powerful, wise but not all-knowing, worthy of respect but not blind devotion. The gods have their own struggles and flaws, their own internal conflicts. This makes them relatable in ways the distant, perfect deity of the Christians isn't to you. Most significantly, your gods don't promise punishment or reward after death based on moral behavior. The afterlife a Viking can expect depends more on how they die than how they lived. Those who fall in battle might be chosen by Odin for his hall Valhalla, where they'll feast and fight until Ragnarok, the final battle at the end of the world. Others might go to Folkvanger, the field ruled by the goddess Freya. Those who die of illness or old age will likely find themselves in Hell's realm, not a place of punishment, but simply a different kind of afterlife, shadowier and less glorious than Valhalla. This understanding of the afterlife shapes how Viking warriors view death, not as something to be feared, but as a transition to be faced courageously when it comes. You've heard men on the ship speak of their hopes for a good death that would earn them a place in Valhalla. Some even wear special amulets or have particular weapons they believe will ensure they're recognized by the Valkyries, the female spirits who choose the worthy dead to join Odin's hall. "I don't fear death itself," one warrior named Leif confides during a quiet moment of shared watch duty. "Only dying poorly, from sickness in my bed, or drowning unseen beneath the waves. I want to fall facing my enemy, weapon in hand, so the Valkyries will know me as worthy." He touches an amulet hanging from his neck. A small, silver hammer of Thor. "My father died fighting Frankish warriors. I hope to do as well when my time comes." This attitude toward death gives Viking warriors a psychological edge in battle. While not fearless, they approach combat with a fatalism that can appear as bravery to their opponents. They believe each person has a fixed lifespan determined by the Norns, the female entities who weave the threads of fate, meaning a warrior will die on their appointed day, regardless of whether they fight cautiously or boldly. Given this belief, it makes sense to fight with full commitment, since hesitation won't prevent death if the day is yours to die. As the voyage progresses southward, the climate gradually changes. The perpetual chill of northern waters gives way to more temperate conditions. The crew sheds layers of clothing, and men who have made this journey before speak of the even warmer climes ahead. You begin to understand why southern lands hold such appeal beyond just their wealth. The milder weather and longer growing seasons offer a stark contrast to the challenging conditions of your homeland. The ship makes several stops along coastal areas for replenishing supplies, gathering information, and occasional small raids. These early encounters are generally successful, reinforcing the crew's confidence, though not without cost. During one skirmish with local defenders, a young warrior on his first voyage takes a spear thrust to the thigh, opening a deep wound that immediately poses a serious threat. Halvar and another older warrior with healing knowledge take charge of the injured man, cleaning the wound as best they can and applying poultices made from herbs carried specifically for this purpose. You assist them, holding the man still as they work. His face is ashen with pain and blood loss, and his skin already shows the clammy sweat that often precedes infection. Will he survive? You ask Halvor quietly when the immediate treatment is complete. If the wound stays clean and his strength holds, perhaps, the old warrior replies. But such injuries often invite in the wound rot. He means infection, the dreaded complication that kills more warriors than immediate battle wounds. We'll know in a few days. Until then, we keep the wound clean, the poultices fresh, and make offerings to Air. Air is a goddess associated with healing, often invoked for the wounded. The following days become a lesson in the harsh realities of Viking medical care. The injured man develops fever despite the treatments. The wound begins to smell foul, and red streaks spread outward from it across his skin, clear signs of infection taking hold. Halvor and the other healer try increasingly desperate measures, including cauterizing parts of the wound with heated metal, a procedure so painful that several strong men are needed to hold the patient still. You take your turn watching over the suffering warrior during night hours. During one such vigil, he becomes lucid after days of delirium. "Am I dying?" he asks, his voice barely audible over the creaking of the ship. The Nordic tradition values honesty, even when it's painful. "It doesn't look good," you tell him. Halvor is doing all he can, but the wound rot has taken hold. He absorbs this with remarkable composure. "Not the death I hoped for," he says after a moment. "No place in Valhalla for me." "You took your wound in battle," you remind him. "That counts for something with the Valkyries, surely." "Perhaps." He swallows with difficulty, his throat dry from fever. "If I don't last till morning, tell them I didn't cry out, that I faced it well." "I will," you promise, offering him a drink of water, "and I'll make sure your share of plunder reaches your family." He manages a faint smile at this. "They'll need it." His eyes close as exhaustion overtakes him again. By morning, he's gone, slipping away quietly during the darkest hours before dawn. The crew performs a burial at sea, wrapping the body in a cloth and weighting it with stones before committing it to the depths with prayers to the gods to guide his soul to an honorable afterlife. You fulfill your promise, telling how he faced death with courage, adding your voice to the brief memorial speeches. The entire ceremony lasts less than an hour. On a Viking voyage, there's little time for extended mourning. By midday, the ship has continued on its southward journey, the incident already fading into the background of daily concerns. This episode affects you more deeply than you let on to your shipmates. The young warrior was close to your age, with family waiting at home, just as you have. His death from what began as a survivable wound highlights the precariousness of the Viking warrior's existence. Battle itself is only the most obvious danger. Infection, accidents, storms, and countless other hazards claim just as many lives far from the glory of combat. "You're thinking too much," Gunnar observes when he finds you staring out at the horizon that evening. "I can see it in your face." "Just considering how thin the thread is between life and death," you reply. "Thin indeed, and measured out by the Norns before we were born," he says, with the characteristic fatalism of the Viking worldview. "All the more reason to live boldly while the thread remains uncut." He claps you on the shoulder. "Bjorn says we'll reach the rich southern shores within 2 weeks. Save your brooding for after we've filled our ship with plunder." The advice is well-intentioned, but doesn't quiet your thoughts. As the voyage continues, you find yourself increasingly drawn to the small group of men who, like you, seem to approach raiding as a necessary evil rather than a joyful pursuit. These men fight bravely when required, but take no particular pleasure in violence for its own sake. They're motivated by practical concerns, providing for families, gaining enough wealth to improve their standing, fulfilling obligations to their chieftains, rather than by bloodlust or the pursuit of glory. This unofficial brotherhood provides subtle support as your ship ventures into increasingly unfamiliar waters. The coastlines change, featuring different types of settlements than those you're accustomed to seeing in the north. The people you occasionally encounter speak languages unintelligible to most of the crew, though a few men with previous experience in these regions can manage basic communication for trading or gathering information. The ship makes several raids on coastal settlements, each more profitable than the last as you penetrate deeper into wealthier territories. The pattern becomes grimly familiar, identifying vulnerable targets, swift attacks with overwhelming force, efficient collection of valuable goods, and rapid withdrawal before larger defensive forces can respond. The crew works with increasing coordination, each man understanding his role in the complex dance of violence and plunder. During one such raid on a prosperous trading settlement, you find yourself leading a small group tasked with securing a stone building that appears to be a storehouse. The structure is more substantial than the wooden buildings common in your homeland, with thick walls and a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands. It takes the combined strength of 3 men with axes to break through. Inside, you discover not just trade goods, but people, a merchant family hiding among their possessions, eyes wide with terror as armed Vikings burst through their door. The father steps forward, protective, saying something in his foreign tongue while making gestures that clearly indicate pleading. Behind him, a woman holds 2 small children close, their faces buried against her clothing. In this moment, you face a choice that crystallizes the moral complexity of the Viking way of life. Some of your more aggressive shipmates would kill the man without hesitation, take the woman and children as thralls, slaves, and seize everything of value. But you see in this family a reflection of your own, people simply trying to survive in a dangerous world, protecting what's theirs as best they can. Take what we need, you tell your companions in Norse, but leave them unharmed. You point to particularly valuable items, bolts of fine cloth, containers that likely hold spices or other luxury goods, a small chest that might contain coins or jewelry. Then you gesture to the family, making a staying motion with your hand and trying to communicate with expression and body language that they won't be harmed if they remain still. Not all your companions approve of this approach, but in the chaos of the raid, with plentiful targets and limited time, they don't argue. The family watches in stunned silence as you efficiently strip their storehouse of portable valuables, but leave them physically untouched. As you depart with your plunder, the father's expression shows confusion mingled with cautious relief. This outcome, while devastating to their livelihood, is far better than what they clearly feared when armed Northmen broke down their door. Back on the ship, as the crew inventories the substantial haul from the settlement, you reflect on the encounter. You've fulfilled your duty to your shipmates and chieftain by securing valuable goods. You've done what was necessary to ensure your family will have greater security in the coming year, but you've also made a small choice for humanity in a situation where brutality would have been easier and expected. Halvar finds you sorting through captured goods, separating items by type and likely value. I heard about your merchant family, he says conversationally, helping you fold a length of fine woven cloth. Some of the younger warriors think you showed weakness. And you? You ask, meeting his gaze. I think you showed wisdom, he replies simply. We take what we need to survive and thrive. Unnecessary cruelty serves no purpose except to harden one's own heart. He runs his weathered fingers over the cloth appreciatively, This will fetch a good price or make fine clothing for your wife. Either way, your children will be warmer this winter without you have an orphan, someone else's. As the successful raid fades into routine and the ship continues its journey, you notice subtle changes in how some crew members interact with you. A few of the more aggressive warriors seem to question your commitment to the Viking way, watching you with measuring eyes during planning discussions for future raids. Others, particularly the older and more thoughtful men like Halvar, show increased respect, recognizing the complexity of your approach rather than seeing it as weakness. This division reflects a broader tension within Viking society itself, between those who embrace raiding primarily as a path to glory and those who view it as a practical necessity in a world of limited resources. Both perspectives have validity within your culture, and most men fall somewhere on a spectrum between these poles rather than at either extreme. You're still finding your own place within this spectrum, balancing pragmatism, morality, and cultural expectations as you navigate the difficult path of the Viking warrior. As your ship sails further south than any in your community has ventured before, the wealth you encounter becomes increasingly tempting. Settlements show signs of prosperity unfamiliar to northern eyes, buildings of stone and brick rather than wood, people wearing colorful garments of fine material, markets displaying foods and goods that seem exotic and valuable. The potential rewards of raiding here are enormous, but so are the risks. These wealthier regions have more organized defenses and can sometimes field impressive fighting forces with better equipment than your own. Bjorn calls a council of the most experienced warriors to plan the final major raid of the voyage, an ambitious attack on a coastal religious center rumored to contain significant treasures. Such targets are favored by Vikings, not just for their wealth, but because they often lack strong military protection, being defended instead by the presumed favor of the Christian God. This will make or break our journey, Bjorn tells the gathered men as he outlines his plan using a rough map scratched in the sand of a secluded cove where you've temporarily beached the ship. If we succeed, every man will return home with silver enough to make his family comfortable for years, not just seasons. If we fail... He doesn't need to complete the thought. Failed raids mean death or capture for many, if not all, participants. As the planning continues deep into the night, with strategies proposed, debated, and refined, you find yourself increasingly respected for your practical input. Your reputation has evolved over the course of the voyage, not as the most ferocious fighter, but as one who thinks clearly in chaotic situations, who considers angles others might miss, who balances aggression with calculation. When the final plan is set, you're assigned to lead a small team responsible for a critical flanking approach that requires both stealth and decisive action when the moment comes. That night, as most of the crew sleeps in preparation for the coming raid, you remain awake, watching stars wheeling slowly overhead. The magnitude of what awaits tomorrow weighs heavily on you. Success will indeed transform your family's prospects, potentially allowing you to expand your farmland, build a better dwelling, or even hire thralls to help with the most demanding work. Failure could mean your children grow up fatherless, your wife struggling alone to maintain what little you already have. The southern gods these people worship are said to reward mercy and forbid killing. Ideas that seem impractical in your harsh world, but nonetheless occasionally resonate with your inner doubts about the Viking way. Yet these same people, despite their gentle God, have created societies with their own forms of cruelty, slavery, exploitation, punishment for those who question authority. Perhaps all human communities, regardless of which gods they honor, struggle with the tension between survival and morality, between what's necessary and what's right. As dawn approaches, you finally drift into a light sleep, your dreams filled with images of home, mingled with fragments of battles past and anticipated. Whatever tomorrow brings, you know you've changed irreversibly from the simple farmer who first boarded a longship months ago. The Viking way has marked you, for better and worse, and the path ahead, whatever its direction, will be shaped by these experiences on the wild, unforgiving sea. Dawn breaks with a thin mist hanging over the water, obscuring the shoreline where your target awaits. This natural cover is a gift from the gods, Bjorn declares, perfect for concealing your approach until the last possible moment. The crew makes final preparations in near silence, checking weapons, securing belongings that might rattle or shift during movement, applying war paint to faces in patterns meant to intimidate enemies and invoke divine protection. Some men whisper personal prayers or touch amulets for luck. Others sit in stern-faced silence, mentally preparing for what's to come. You lead your small team through final preparations for your specific role in the raid. Your group will approach from an angle, using a small stream that intelligence suggests runs near the religious complex. While the main force creates a distraction at the front gates, your team will scale the rear wall, neutralize any guards you encounter, and open a secondary entrance for additional warriors to pour through. It's a position of significant responsibility, one that reflects the trust you've earned over the course of the voyage. Remember, you tell your team quietly as you check their readiness. Speed and silence until we're inside. Then chaos and noise to spread confusion. These tactics have proven effective in previous raids. The contrast between stealthy approach and explosive violence once engaged tends to paralyze defenders with shock, creating crucial moments of advantage. The ship moves silently through the mist, oars dipping into the water with minimal splash thanks to the crew's practiced discipline. As you near the shore, the first outlines of buildings become visible through the thinning fog. Stone structures, larger and more ornate than anything in your homeland. At their center rises a tower topped with the Christian cross, the focal point of the complex you're about to raid. The moment of landing brings the familiar surge of tension, that critical transition from sea to land when the crew is most vulnerable. But the mist has served its purpose well. No alarm sounds as warriors disembark in organized groups according to their assigned roles. Your team separates from the main force, moving low and fast along the shoreline until you reach the small stream marked on Bjorn's rough map. The stream provides both cover and a guide as you follow it toward the rear of the complex. The sun is rising higher now, burning away the mist in patches, adding urgency to your movement. If you're not in position when the main attack begins, the entire plan could unravel. Your heart pounds steadily against your ribs, but your breathing remains controlled. This focused state, neither panicked nor detached, is something you've learned to cultivate through experience. You reach the rear wall without encountering resistance, another favorable sign. The stone barrier stands about twice the height of a man, formidable but manageable with the right approach. Two of your strongest team members brace themselves against the wall, forming human steps for the others. You're among the first to climb, moving quickly but carefully to avoid dislodging loose stones that might create noise. At the top of the wall, you pause briefly to survey what lies beyond, a garden area with fruit trees and herb beds, tended by monks who are fortunately absent at this early hour, likely gathered for morning prayers. You signal the all clear to your team and drop silently to the ground on the inner side, rolling to absorb the impact. One by one, your teammates follow until all 8 of you are inside the complex's perimeter. Moving through the garden toward the cluster of stone buildings, you identify your secondary target, a wooden door reinforced with iron that appears to lead into a side wing of the main structure. 2 sentries stand nearby, looking outward toward the main entrance, unaware of the danger approaching from behind. You signal to your archers, who nock arrows and draw in perfect unison. The arrows find their marks with deadly precision, striking the guards in their upper backs. Both fall with minimal sound, their deaths as quiet as your approach. Your team moves quickly to secure the door, examining its locking mechanism with practiced eyes. It's substantial but not impregnable. 2 men apply leverage with short iron bars carried specifically for this purpose, while another uses the blade of his axe to force the lock. The wood creaks in protest, then gives way with a sharp crack that sounds alarmingly loud in the morning stillness. Almost simultaneously, you hear the war cries erupt from the front of the complex. The main attack has begun right on schedule. The synchronized timing sends a surge of satisfaction through you. The months of raiding together have forged your crew into a coordinated force capable of complex operations. You signal to the team member carrying the horn, who blows a short, sharp blast to notify the waiting secondary force that their entrance is secured. What follows is the controlled chaos of a well-executed raid. Your team holds the side entrance as additional warriors pour through, branching out to secure different areas of the complex. The monks and priests, caught between morning prayers and daily duties, offer minimal resistance. Most flee or cower rather than fight, their religious training providing little preparation for dealing with armed raiders. You lead your original team deeper into the complex, toward what intelligence suggests is a treasury or repository for valuable items. The stone corridors echo with distant shouts and occasional clashes of weapons where scattered guards attempt resistance. The air fills with the acrid scent of smoke as some buildings are set ablaze, both to create confusion and to provide light in the darker interior spaces. Following a mental map constructed from information gathered before the raid, you navigate the warren of corridors and chambers. Most rooms contain only sparse furnishings, simple beds, wooden tables, religious icons of limited material value. But as you penetrate deeper, the spaces become more elaborate, with colored glass in windows, tapestries on walls, and finally, the reinforced door you've been seeking. This barrier proves more substantial than the exterior entrance, designed specifically to protect valuables. While your team works to breach it, you hear sounds of approaching resistance, the complex's defenders rallying after the initial shock. You position half your team to face this new threat, forming a shield wall in the narrow corridor, while the others continue their effort to access the treasury. The defenders who appear at the corridor's end are not monks, but professional guards, better armed and armored than most you've faced on this voyage. Their leader shouts commands in their foreign tongue, and they advance with disciplined coordination that suggests military training. This will not be a simple matter of intimidating unarmed religious men. The clash when it comes is brutal and jarring. Shields meet with splintering impact, weapons probe for openings, men grunt and shout in 2 languages as they struggle for advantage in the confined space. Your shield takes multiple blows, the vibrations traveling painfully up your arm. You counter when possible, your axe finding flesh once, twice, drawing screams and hot spurts of blood that spatter across your face and chest. Behind you, there's a triumphant shout as your team finally breaches the treasury door, but you can't turn to look. The press of combat demands your full attention. A guard's sword slides past your shield, opening a shallow cut along your ribs that burns like fire. You respond with a shield bash that unbalances your opponent, followed by an axe strike to his exposed leg that drops him to the stone floor. The corridor battle reaches a tipping point when Gunnar, fighting beside you in the shield wall, manages to fell the enemy leader with a well-placed strike. The remaining guards hesitate, then begin a fighting retreat, dragging their wounded with them. You maintain pressure, advancing steadily to prevent them from regrouping, pushing them further from the treasury where your teammates are now gathering valuables. When you finally turn back toward the treasury, the sight momentarily steals your breath. Unlike the modest wealth of previous raids, this room contains genuine riches, chalices and religious implements of pure gold and silver, containers of coins, jeweled book covers, elaborately worked reliquaries. Your team is already stuffing the most valuable and portable items into sacks and pouches, working with practiced efficiency despite their obvious excitement. "The gods have favored us indeed," breathes one of your teammates, holding up a golden cross studded with gemstones. The irony of invoking Norse gods while plundering Christian treasures doesn't escape you, but there's no time for theological contemplation. You order your men to finish quickly. The longer you remain, the more time the defenders have to organize a more substantial response. With treasures secured and slung over shoulders or tucked into belts, your team begins the withdrawal through the routes planned in advance. The complex is now fully engulfed in the controlled chaos of a successful raid. Smoke billows from several buildings, screams and shouts echo across courtyards, and your fellow Vikings move purposefully through it all, gathering plunder and converging gradually toward extraction points. You encounter Bjorn in a central courtyard, directing the overall withdrawal. His face is streaked with soot and blood, but his expression shows fierce satisfaction. "The ships are being loaded now," he tells you. "Your team's work at the rear entrance was perfect. We've taken more wealth today than in 10 ordinary raids." The retreat to the ships proceeds in good order, with rear guard actions to discourage pursuit. Local reinforcements are visible in the distance, but they're too far away to threaten your withdrawal. As you help load the substantial plunder onto the longships, you permit yourself a moment of cautious optimism. The raid has succeeded beyond expectations, with minimal losses among your crew. If you can return safely to your homeland with this wealth, your family's future will indeed be transformed. But the gods are fickle in their favors, and the sea demands its own price for passage. 3 days into your homeward journey, with spirits high and the holds full of treasure, nature reminds you of her indifference to human triumphs. The first signs come as a subtle shift in the wind and an unnatural darkening of the western sky. Experienced sailors among the crew exchange worried glances, reading the approaching weather with the sensitivity that comes from years facing the sea's moods. "Storm coming," Halvar announces grimly. "A big one, by the look of it." Bjorn immediately orders preparations, securing loose items, rigging extra lashings for the valuable cargo, lowering and stowing the sail before it can be shredded by strengthening winds. Men don additional layers of clothing despite the warm southern climate, knowing how quickly hypothermia can set in when soaked by cold seawater. The storm hits with a fury that seems almost personal, as though the Christian god is expressing his wrath for the plundering of his house. Waves taller than the ship's mast crash over the gunwales, threatening to swamp the vessel with each impact. The wind howls like a chorus of angry spirits, tearing at clothing and skin with icy fingers. Rain falls so heavily that it becomes difficult to breathe without turning away from its onslaught. You take your turn at the bailing, using a wooden bucket to scoop seawater from the bottom of the ship and toss it back into the churning ocean. It's an exhausting, seemingly endless task. For every bucketful you remove, another wave deposits more. Your hands become raw and blistered from the rough wood and constant contact with salt water. Your back screams with pain from the repetitive bending and lifting. Yet you dare not stop, knowing that if the ship takes on too much water, it will founder and sink. Around you, other men fight their own battles against the storm's fury. Some man the oars, trying to keep the ship positioned properly against the waves. Others monitor and repair damage as it occurs, lashing down cargo that breaks free, reinforcing weakened sections of hull, tending to injuries as men are thrown against hard surfaces or struck by shifting objects. "Stay with the ship," Bjorn shouts above the storm's roar when a particularly massive wave nearly capsizes the vessel. "She's strong, she'll ride it out if we do our part." His confidence helps steady the crew, providing a psychological anchor amidst the chaos. The storm rages for a full day and night, an eternity of desperate struggle against natural forces far beyond human control. When it finally begins to abate, the toll becomes clear. One man was washed overboard, despite being tied to his position with a safety line. The rope snapped under the force of a massive wave. Several others suffer significant injuries, including broken bones and deep lacerations. The ship itself has sustained damage to its hull and lost some of its precious cargo when a section of the ship partially collapsed under the weight of water. Most significantly, the storm has blown you far off course. When the clouds finally clear enough for navigation, the stars reveal you've been driven eastward, away from the direct route home. This detour will add weeks to your journey, consuming precious supplies and extending the physical hardships of sea travel. In the storm's aftermath, the mood aboard ship darkens noticeably. The initial elation of the successful raid gives way to grim endurance. Food rations are reduced to account for the extended journey. Fresh water becomes increasingly precious as barrel seals leak from the battering of the storm, contaminating some supplies with seawater. Men grow irritable from constant discomfort, limited sleep, and the uncertainty of when they'll see home again. Physical ailments that might be minor on land become serious concerns at sea. Small cuts from daily work or the recent fighting refuse to heal in the constant damp conditions, instead festering into painful infections. A persistent cough spreads through the crew, the sound echoing across the water during quiet nights. Teeth that ached occasionally on land now throb constantly, with no proper remedies available beyond willow bark tea or the extreme solution of extraction using crude pliers. Your own body bears witness to these accumulated hardships. The cut along your ribs from the raid has developed an angry red inflammation, despite your efforts to keep it clean. Your hands are a map of cuts, blisters, and calluses from rowing, bailing, and handling weapons. Your once strong back now pains you constantly from the unnatural positions of shipboard life. Even your teeth have begun to trouble you, particularly a molar on the lower right that sends shooting pain through your jaw when you eat. These physical discomforts would be more bearable if the end were clearly in sight, but the extended journey stretches before you with no definite conclusion. Each day brings new challenges, navigational difficulties around unfamiliar coastlines, tense encounters with local vessels, the constant search for safe harbors to resupply and rest. During one such resupply stop at a small coastal settlement, an incident occurs that crystallizes your growing disillusionment with the Viking way of life. The local population, seeing your approach, abandons their village rather than risk confrontation, leaving behind the elderly and infirm who couldn't travel quickly enough. The contrast between your crew's relative wealth, ships laden with golden treasures, and the abject fear and poverty of these villagers strikes you forcefully, while others gather what useful supplies remain in the abandoned dwellings. You find yourself drawn to an old man left behind, huddled in a simple hut. He watches your approach with eyes that show resignation rather than fear. He's too old to run, too weak to fight, simply waiting for whatever fate arrives in the form of northern raiders. Instead of threatening or ignoring him, you find yourself sitting beside him in the dim interior of the hut. You can't communicate with words, but you offer him a portion of your own rations, dried meat and a strip of flatbread. His surprise is evident as he cautiously accepts this unexpected kindness from a Viking warrior. You sit in silence as he eats, this strange moment of human connection amidst the broader context of raiding and violence feeling somehow more meaningful than all the gold in your ship's hold. When voices call for you to return to the ship, you leave the old man with a small knife, useful for daily tasks, not valuable enough to be missed from your equipment, but potentially life-saving for someone left alone to survive until his people return. It's a small gesture, almost meaningless in the grand scheme, yet it feels like a reclamation of something essential that the Viking path has been steadily eroding within you. Back aboard ship, you keep this encounter to yourself, knowing most of your companions wouldn't understand or would interpret it as weakness. But Halvar, with his uncanny perception, seems to sense the change in you. The longer we live, the more we understand that plunder isn't the only thing of value in this world, he comments quietly as you both take the evening watch. Some men never learn this. They die rich in silver, but poor in wisdom. The journey continues northward at an agonizing pace, fighting contrary winds and navigational challenges. Your ship eventually joins with another Viking vessel returning from its own raids, providing some security in numbers and a brief boost to morale as news and stories are exchanged between crews. But the fundamental hardships remain: dwindling supplies, mounting physical ailments, the psychological strain of prolonged separation from home and family. As weeks stretch into months, with progress painfully slow compared to the outbound journey, you find yourself increasingly dwelling on questions about the path you've chosen, the substantial wealth you'll bring home, even after losses to the storm, will indeed improve your family's circumstances, but at what cost to your body, which now aches constantly and bears new scars both visible and hidden? What cost to your spirit, shaped by experiences of violence and hardship that have changed you in ways your loved ones may not recognize? What cost to your relationship with gods who seem increasingly complex and ambiguous in their judgments and favors? These questions have no simple answers, but the asking of them marks its own kind of transition. The naive farmer who first boarded a Viking ship seeking simple solutions to material problems has been replaced by a more complex individual, still a warrior when necessary, still a provider for his family, but also increasingly a thinker, a questioner, a seeker of meaning beyond mere survival. As your ship finally approaches familiar northern waters, with recognizable coastlines emerging on the horizon, you stand at the prow with mixed emotions churning within you. There's undeniable joy at the prospect of reunion with your family, pride in the wealth you're bringing home, satisfaction in having survived challenges that claimed other lives. But beneath these positive feelings runs a current of uncertainty about how you'll reintegrate into peaceful farm life, how you'll reconcile the person you've become with the community you left behind. The northern sun breaks through persistent clouds, illuminating the fjord entrance that leads to your home settlement. The light catches on the golden treasures visible in the ship's hold, making them gleam with alluring brilliance. Yet you find your eyes drawn instead to simpler sights, the familiar mountain shapes, the forests of pine and birch, the smoke from hearth fires rising from scattered homesteads. These humble elements of home now seem as precious as any plundered gold. As the crew raises a triumphant sailing chant, their voices carrying across the water to announce their return, you join in with a complex heart, grateful for survival, changed by experience, uncertain of the future, but moving inexorably toward home and whatever awaits there. The Viking path has marked you permanently, with all its glory and all its suffering. How you integrate these marks into the next chapter of your life remains to be seen as the long ship glides smoothly into the fjord's embracing arms. Word of your ship's return spreads quickly through the settlement. By the time you navigate the final stretch of the fjord, the shoreline is dotted with figures, families anxiously watching for loved ones, community members eager for news and goods from distant lands, children running along the water's edge in excitement. The long ship's dragon-headed prow, weather-beaten but proud, announces your return more effectively than any herald could. As the keel grinds against the pebbled shore, you search the gathered crowd for familiar faces. There, your wife stands with your children beside her, shielding her eyes against the low northern sun. Unlike your first return, when relief dominated her expression, her face now shows a more complex mixture of emotions. Joy at your survival, certainly, but also something more guarded, as though she's waiting to discover which version of you has returned this time. The homecoming process has its own choreography, refined by generations of Viking communities welcoming back their warriors. First comes the official greeting from the settlement's leaders, acknowledging the expedition's return and success. Then, the unloading of plunder, with appropriate portions set aside for the gods, the chieftain, and each participant according to their contribution. Finally, the reunions, warriors returning to the arms of families who have carried on without them for seasons at a time. When you finally stand before your wife, the months of separation hang between you like an invisible veil. She studies your face, noting the new scar along your cheek, the deeper lines around your eyes, the weathered quality of your skin. You've aged years in the months you've been gone. Her hands, when they reach for yours, hesitate briefly before making contact, as though she's not entirely certain who she's welcoming home. "You've returned," she says simply, her voice carrying more meaning than the words themselves convey. "I have," you reply, equally simple, equally laden with unspoken thoughts. Your children show less restraint, the youngest launching herself into your arms while the older ones cluster around, touching your clothing and gear with curious fingers, already asking about your journey and the foreign places you've seen. Their innocent excitement breaks the tension, allowing a more natural reunion to unfold. That evening, your family gathers in your dwelling around a hearth fire better stocked with fuel than before your departure, one immediate benefit of the wealth you've brought home. As you share a meal richer than your usual fare, supplemented with exotic spices and preserved fruits from your voyage, you tell carefully edited stories of your travels. You describe the different landscapes, the unusual buildings, the varieties of ships you encountered at sea. You speak of navigational challenges overcome and successful trading, emphasizing this aspect over raiding. You share humorous incidents and moments of natural beauty witnessed during the journey. What you don't describe are the battles where blood sprayed across your face as your axe found human flesh, the infections that claimed shipmates after seemingly minor wounds, the terror of storms that threatened to swallow your vessel whole, or the moral compromises that still trouble your dreams. These darker elements of the Viking warrior's experience remain unspoken, held within you like stones in a leather pouch, their weight felt but their specific shapes hidden from view. Your wife listens attentively, asking occasional questions that reveal her intelligence and perception. She catches the gaps in your narrative, the places where you gloss over details or redirect conversation. But she doesn't press, at least not with the children present. Later, when they've fallen asleep and you sit together in the quieter darkness, sharing a cup of mead, she speaks more directly. "You've changed again," she observes, More than after the first voyage. You nod, staring into the embers of the fire. The journey was longer, more difficult. It's not just that. Her hand finds yours in the dim light. There's something in your eyes that wasn't there before, something that's seen too much. How perceptive she is, this partner you sometimes underestimate. In the Norse world, marriages are practical arrangements as much as emotional bonds, but over years together, genuine understanding develops between compatible spirits. She knows you in ways that even your shield brothers from the ship do not. I've been thinking about the path we're on, you admit, about whether there might be other ways. She listens as you tentatively share some of your growing doubts about the Viking way of life, not a full confession of all you've experienced, but enough to convey your internal conflict, the wealth gained through raiding versus the human cost involved, the physical toll on those who live by the sword and sea, the complexity of serving gods who value both honor and violence, both loyalty to community and personal glory. The silver and gold will help us, you conclude, but I'm not certain it was worth what it cost to obtain, not just in risk and hardship, but in, you struggle to articulate the deeper cost, in who I become when I'm out there. Your wife considers this thoughtfully. Unlike some women in your community who glorify the warrior path and urge their men toward greater feats of daring, she has always been pragmatic about survival without romanticizing violence. There may be other ways, she agrees. The question is whether our community will accept them. This cuts to the heart of your dilemma. Viking society, while allowing considerable individual freedom in many respects, also exerts powerful conformity pressures regarding certain core values: courage, loyalty to one's group, willingness to fight when called upon. To reject these values outright would mean potential exclusion from the community's protection and support, a dangerous proposition in the harsh northern environment where cooperation means survival. In the days that follow your return, you reintegrate into the settlement's daily rhythms. Your body, pushed to extremes during the voyage, gradually begins to heal from the worst of its ailments, though some new limitations appear permanent. The deep cut along your ribs has left a puckered scar and occasional pain when you move certain ways. Your back, strained from months of rowing and fighting, protests during long days of farm work. Several teeth that began troubling you at sea continue to cause pain, affecting what you can comfortably eat. These physical changes are matched by shifts in how your community perceives and treats you. Your status has risen with your second successful voyage and the substantial wealth you've brought back. People seek your opinion on matters beyond farming, looking to you as someone with broader experience of the world. Young men contemplating their first voyages ask for advice and insights. Even Bjorn, the expedition's leader, acknowledges you with greater respect, sometimes consulting you on community decisions. Yet, alongside these social benefits comes a growing expectation of further participation in the Viking way. Plans are already forming for next season's expeditions, with your name mentioned prominently among those expected to join. The success of your southern raid has whetted appetites for more ambitious ventures, pushing even further into wealthy foreign territories. Your proven skills as both fighter and tactical thinker make you particularly valuable to such enterprises. This rising tension between external expectations and internal doubts reaches a critical point during the autumn gathering, when your community comes together for the annual sacrifice to thank the gods for harvest and plunder, and to seek their favor for the coming year. The ritual slaughter of animals, the sprinkling of blood on sacred images, the communal feast that follows. All these elements have been familiar since childhood, but now you view them through eyes changed by wider experience. During the feast, Bjorn formally announces his intention to lead an even larger expedition when spring arrives. The southern lands are richer than we imagined, he tells the assembled community, with treasures beyond counting for those brave enough to take them. The gods have shown their favor by guiding us to these places and returning us safely with our plunder. As he speaks, his gaze moves around the gathering, lingering meaningfully on those, like you, who are expected to form the core of this new venture. There's an unspoken but unmistakable pressure in that look, a reminder of communal expectations and the social consequences of failing to meet them. Later in the evening, as the celebration grows louder with the free flow of mead and ale, you find yourself in conversation with Halvar. The old warrior has survived another voyage despite his age, though he moves more stiffly than before and coughs frequently in the cool autumn air. His weathered face shows both the physical toll of the Viking life and the wisdom gained through its experiences. Bjorn has grand plans, you observe, keeping your tone neutral. Halvar nods, taking a measured sip from his drinking horn. Always bigger, always further. It's the way of ambitious men. And you? Will you join his next venture? The old warrior gazes into the central fire for a long moment before answering. No, my last voyage was truly my last. These bones have had enough of ship benches and shield walls. He looks at you directly. But you're young enough for many more journeys, skilled enough to rise higher in the hierarchy. Perhaps even lead your own expeditions someday. You hesitate, unsure how much of your inner conflict to reveal. Halvar has been something of a mentor, but he's still deeply embedded in the warrior culture despite his philosophical tendencies. I've been considering other paths, you finally admit. Rather than immediate disapproval, Halvar's expression shows thoughtful consideration. There are many ways to serve family and community, he says carefully. Not all require boarding a longship. He glances around to ensure no others are within earshot before continuing. I've known men who made 1 or 2 voyages, secured enough wealth to establish themselves more comfortably, then found reasons to remain home thereafter. It can be done, though it requires careful handling. This glimpse of a potential middle path, neither fully embracing nor completely rejecting the Viking way, offers a thread of hope. Perhaps you could leverage your improved status and wealth to create a more stable life, without further raiding, finding ways to contribute to your community that don't involve the violence and moral compromises of the warrior's journey. The conversation with Halvar plants a seed that grows over the following weeks as winter settles onto the northern landscape. The question of your future path becomes intertwined with practical considerations about how to invest the wealth you've brought home. Unlike some warriors who squander their plunder on elaborate weapons, showy garments, or extensive drinking, you've always viewed raiding primarily as a means to improve your family's standing and security. With your wife's counsel, you make careful decisions. Some silver goes to purchase additional farmland adjoining your original plot, not an extravagant estate that might provoke envy, but enough to increase your agricultural output significantly. Some is traded for better livestock, hardier cattle, an additional horse that will make work more efficient. Some is set aside for potential emergencies or future opportunities, and a meaningful portion is contributed to community projects, reinforcing the settlement's defensive structures, improving the communal hall where gatherings occur, supporting those who've lost providers to illness or misadventure. These investments serve multiple purposes. They visibly demonstrate that your raiding wealth benefits not just your immediate family, but the broader community. They establish you as someone concerned with collective welfare rather than merely personal glory. And perhaps most importantly, they create tangible value that would be jeopardized by your death or long absence on future expeditions. a practical argument for remaining home that even the most traditional Viking mindset might understand. As the darkest days of winter give way to gradually lengthening daylight, your strategy begins to take shape. You won't directly refuse Bjorn's expectation that you join his expedition. Such outright rejection would damage your standing irreparably. Instead, you'll find yourself unfortunately delayed by essential spring planting on your expanded farmland, with promises to perhaps join later expeditions that somehow never quite materialize. You'll emphasize your contributions to local defense, positioning yourself as someone whose value to the community lies in protection rather than offensive raiding. It's not a perfect solution. There will be social costs, some loss of prestige among the most raid-focused members of your community, some whispered questions about your courage or commitment, but balanced against the physical, psychological, and moral costs of continuing the warrior path, these seem increasingly acceptable trade-offs. Your wife supports this direction, though she remains pragmatic about the challenges involved. It won't be simple, she warns, one night as you discuss your plans. The pull of the old ways is strong, and men like Bjorn won't easily accept your withdrawal from their world. I know, you acknowledge, but I've seen enough of that world now to know its true price. The glory the skalds sing about leaves out the filth and fear, the sickness and suffering, the moments where you look at yourself and wonder what you've become. She touches the scar along your cheek gently. And if our sons someday want to follow that path, what will you tell them? This question strikes at the heart of your evolving perspective. You want to protect your children from the hardships and moral compromises you've experienced, yet you understand the complex social pressures and economic necessities that drive the Viking way of life. Simply forbidding them from ever raiding would contradict the Norse values of courage and self-determination that you still believe in, despite your misgivings about how these qualities are sometimes channeled. I'll tell them the whole truth, you decide. Not just the heroic tales, but the ugly realities too, the glory and the suffering, the wealth and the cost. Then they can choose with open eyes, which is more than most of us were given. As winter relaxes its grip and the first signs of spring appear, preparations for Bjorn's expedition begin in earnest. Ships are repaired and reinforced after the harsh season. Weapons are sharpened and oiled. Supplies are gathered and packed. The energy in your settlement noticeably shifts toward the outward focus of the raiding season, with conversations increasingly dominated by plans, speculations, and boasts about the coming journey. Bjorn approaches you directly, as expected, his manner jovial, but his eyes watchful. "We'll need your experience for this venture," he says, phrasing it as a statement rather than a question. Especially with the southern approach you handled so effectively last time. You've prepared for this moment, crafting a response that deflects without directly refusing. "My farm expansion requires careful attention this spring," you explain. "The new land needs proper preparation if it's to yield well, and the timing is critical. I'd planned to join you later in the season, perhaps catching up when you reach the trading post at Hedeby." Bjorn's expression shows he understands the underlying message. Your priorities have shifted away from raiding, but he chooses not to force a confrontation. Your status within the community, bolstered by your visible investments and contributions, provides some insulation from direct challenge. "We'll look for you at Hedeby then," he says simply, though both of you know this rendezvous is unlikely to occur. When the expedition departs with the spring tides, you stand among those bidding farewell rather than those manning the oars. It's a strange feeling watching the dragon-headed prows glide away without you, hearing the familiar creak of wood and chant of rowers fade into distance. Part of you still responds to the call of adventure and possibility that those ships represent, but a stronger part feels profound relief at remaining on solid ground, connected to family and sustainable work, rather than the precarious existence of the raiding path. Your life settles into new rhythms shaped by your expanded farming responsibilities, community involvement, and family connections. Without the violent interruptions of the warrior's journey, you find deeper satisfaction in watching crops grow under your care, seeing your children develop new skills and understanding, working alongside your wife as genuine partners in creating a stable future. The wealth from your raiding days, carefully managed, provides a foundation of security without requiring continuous replenishment through further violence. This transition doesn't occur without challenges. Occasionally, returning ships bring news and plunder that momentarily reawakens the Viking wanderlust. Sometimes, during community gatherings, you notice subtle shifts in how certain men interact with you, a slight cooling, a questioning glance, an implicit challenge to your choice of remaining home. The most raid-focused members of your society view your path as a partial rejection of their values, though they rarely express this directly. More difficult are the nights when memories of your warrior days resurface in dreams. Both the camaraderie and excitement, alongside the violence and moral ambiguity. You sometimes wake sweating from vivid recreations of storms at sea or bloody encounters on foreign shores. Your body bears permanent reminders of that life and its scars and occasional pains. Your mind carries less visible but equally lasting marks from the things you've witnessed and done. Yet alongside these challenges comes a growing sense of having found a more sustainable path, one that honors core Viking values of courage, provision for family, and contribution to community, while avoiding the worst excesses and contradictions of the raiding life. You discover that the skills developed during your warrior journey, strategic thinking, performance under pressure, leadership in challenging circumstances, serve you well in your new focus, though applied to building rather than taking, to growth rather than destruction. As seasons pass into years, your choice gradually gains acceptance within the community. Some other warriors, particularly those who've accumulated enough wealth to establish themselves comfortably, follow similar paths of transition from raiding to local focus. The settlement benefits from this retention of experienced individuals whose skills and perspectives have been broadened by exposure to wider worlds. Even Bjorn eventually reaches a point where age and accumulated injury lead him to remain home, though he continues to speak of the raiding days as the pinnacle of meaningful experience. One autumn evening, many years after your final voyage, you sit with your now adult children around the hearth fire. Your oldest son, approaching the age you were when you first went a Viking, asks about those experiences. Unlike the carefully edited tales you told when they were younger, you now share a more complete perspective, balancing the excitement and achievement with the hardship and moral complexity. The sagas make it sound glorious, your son observes, but your telling makes it seem more complicated. Life usually is, you reply, stirring the fire to release new warmth as the evening chill deepens. The skald's tales serve their purpose, inspiring courage and celebrating our people's accomplishments, but they leave out much that matters. Do you regret it? Your daughter asks. The raiding, the fighting. You consider this question carefully, wanting to offer honest wisdom rather than simple answers. I regret certain moments, certain choices made in the heat of battle or the pressure of conformity, but I don't regret the journey itself. You look around at your family, at the comfortable dwelling built with resources that raiding helped provide, at the community visible through your doorway that functions with greater prosperity and security than when you were young. The Viking path is part of who we are as a people. Our courage, our exploration, our willingness to risk for potential gain. But it's not the entirety of who we can be. The same strength that makes a man effective with axe and shield can be turned to building rather than breaking, to protecting rather than threatening, to creating a future rather than simply taking from others. You meet each of your children's eyes in turn. The challenge is finding the right balance for your own life and time. This conversation captures the essence of your evolved perspective, neither a complete embrace nor a total rejection of the Viking warrior tradition, but a nuanced understanding of its place within a broader conception of meaningful northern life. You've found your own balance, creating a legacy more complex but ultimately more satisfying than that of warriors commemorated only for their fierceness in battle or the wealth of their plunder. As night deepens and your family gradually disperses to their sleeping places, you step outside briefly to feel the crisp autumn air and view the stars wheeling overhead, the same stars that once guided your longship through unknown waters. The northern lights shimmer across the sky in ghostly ribbons of color, a reminder of the gods' continuing presence in the world, despite humanity's changing ways. You wonder what future generations will make of your time, of the Viking Age with all its contradictions and complexities. Will they remember only the dramatic raids, the impressive ships, the fearsome reputation that spread terror across foreign shores? Or will they also understand the everyday realities, the farming that sustained communities, the trading that connected cultures, the gradual adaptations to changing circumstances that allowed your people to survive and sometimes thrive in challenging environments? History, like saga-telling, tends to emphasize the exceptional over the ordinary, the dramatic over the sustainable. But true understanding requires acknowledging both, the glory and the suffering, the accomplishment and the cost, the moments of extraordinary courage alongside the quiet endurance of daily challenges. As you turn back toward your dwelling, toward the family that represents your most meaningful legacy, you carry this balanced perspective as hard-won wisdom. The Viking warrior's path, with all its hardships and moral complexities, formed an important chapter in your life story, but not its entire narrative. In finding your way beyond that path while honoring its valid core, you've helped create space for your children and community to write their own continuing stories, tales that might never be celebrated in dramatic sagas, but that constitute the true fabric of northern life, with all its struggles, adaptations, and enduring resilience.